Javier Milei has changed the game when it comes to the nature of the presidential candidacy in Argentina. Running under the banner of the Libertarian Party, what we see is he's pushing for radical decentralization, and I cannot wait to see the interview that he will soon have with Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson once again breaking the mold when it comes to the nature of the establishment press after he has now gone independent on Twitter. This interview is going to be gangbusters. Javier Milei coming from the school of thought of the Austrian School of Economics and Tucker being more of that of a Keynesian. I cannot wait to what I would argue would see Tucker Carlson be hopefully schooled on economics, and he would come around to the fact that Austrian economics is simply a more advanced and I would argue sound grounding theory to understand the economic processes that we orient ourselves under in the free market system. Let's go ahead and jump into the reaction to this. This is quite fascinating. Let's go. A tweet from Tucker Carlson is how this was all announced, and it says, Javier Milei in Buenos Aires, enemy of the Washington Post and probably the next president of Argentina. Man, I hope so. I genuinely cannot wait, and just as Libertarian Extremist says, I cannot wait for this interview, and I said my body is ready because my God, it most certainly is. Being Libertarian, Eric July's outlet says, hopefully America will follow. And here we see from Brian Krasenstein, is enemy of the Washington Post the best qualifying attribute you could find? I would find or think that the enemy of Fox News would be better considering the $1 billion suit that they lost. And yeah, if we were talking about Tucker Carlson, but we're talking about Javier Milei, you absolute dope. And he's just trying to get a shot, and Brian Krasenstein has become nothing more than a reply guy. The problem now with how Elon Musk has structured Twitter is that you just have nothing more than engagement farmers, and that's what the reply guys have become. They've become engagement farmers because they can get paid for their engagement because of the ads that are run on the tweets that people see. So, because of that, I don't know if Brian Krasenstein genuinely believes as the things that he believes, or if he's saying them because he's nothing more than an establishment mouthpiece and he's able to monetize the hatred and be able to push a rhetoric and a narrative. But I've seen him and his brothers numerous times come out and have very nuanced and honest takes, and they very well could just be purporting the ideals that they believe in their hearts. And I don't want to tar and feather someone and say that they're nothing more than an establishment mouthpiece, but I will admit that is what they genuinely sound like to me many a times. So, back to what he says. He says, is the enemy of the Washington Post the best qualifying attribute you could find? Well, Brian, here's the deal. It absolutely is, because the enemy of the Washington Post means that he's the enemy of the corporate press. And the corporate press are the enemy of the people. And if you understood this, maybe you would be respected by a lot more people than you are. Moving on, we see from Bitcoin News, just in Tucker Carlson interviews Argentinian presidential candidate Javier Milei, millions of viewers on X are about to get a big lesson in Austrian economics. And as I said, my body is ready, because I can't wait not only for millions of people on Twitter to get this understanding of Austrian economics from someone who I would argue can deliver it fairly well, but not only that, Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson, who is someone from the Keynesian school of thought, and if you want more explanation on this, you can go watch his Heritage Speech Foundation where he talks about this in further detail. And I don't know exactly where in the speech it is. It's roughly 36 minutes long. Go listen to it. Put it on while you're doing something around the house. Well worth your time. Tucker Carlson's a very interesting speaker, even if you disagree with some of the things he says like I do. Nonetheless, moving on to another thing from Bitcoin News. From The Economist. The Economist bashes leading Argentinian presidential candidate Javier Milei. They claim that Bitcoin advocate is intemperate, rash, and outlandish. Little about Mr. Milei, suggesting he is the savior of Argentina's needs. And I will be getting into this in just a moment. The Economist having just absolutely the worst take when it comes to this, being wrong for the past 100 years, putting us into the economic turmoil that we've gotten ourselves into, not being able to predict the fact of what's gotten us to the point of being $31 trillion in debt in the United States. But yeah, we should listen to The Economist on what's going on and how Argentina should structure their economy. So, from Jared Dillon, it says, I try to be pretty measured on here, but these fucking jerk-offs at The Economist have finally jumped the shark. 100 years of economic mismanagement, and they take a fucking dump on the one guy who can fix it. Die in a fucking fire, Economist. And I will salute to that. Because realistically, how is it that after being wrong for 100 years, putting our country in $31 trillion of debt that you couldn't predict because the policies you said were best were implemented by the establishment, many of the times because they had the people who write the articles and stuff who are many of the times their advisors, because they go from working in government to writing these articles to working for big corporations, and there's just this massive circular loop of propaganda that eventually gets pushed. So, once again, we see the corporate press is the enemy of the people. And I'm just going to go ahead and comment on this. He says, fucking worthless human beings, pure garbage haulers. And absolutely, this reminds me of something that Sargon of Akkad said. They are nothing more than filthy, filthy smear merchants. Every single time. And it also brings me another quote from Michael Malice. how the American people need to look at the corporate press is like they are nothing more than a tobacco executive. The war is won when the American people look at a journalist exactly the same way they look at a tobacco executive and a tobacco salesman. Like they're trying to sell and peddle you poison, and they do not care as long as they get their outcome that is desired for them. Okay, let's go ahead and jump on. We're going to jump into Peter St. Owen. She says, can't wait for the Tucker Carlson Milei interview. Javier Milei wants to shut down Argentina's central bank and 80% of its corrupt and useless government. And he's leading in the polls. I did a video on Milei a few weeks ago. And Peter St. Owen, I love his takes. I actually have something on $4.5 billion lost in the electric car industry, as $1 trillion in credit card debt lost. And the thing that I really want to get into in this, well, it's this video. But I have so much stuff backed up on my tabs that I've been wanting to cover from Peter. And if you want to get some sound economic analysis, go ahead and check him out. I will have his link in the description below. Let's go ahead and jump into this video.
A few days ago, Argentina's Trump-admiring populist Javier Milei pulled off a shock win in Argentina's nationwide presidential primary. Here's a taste.
¡Zurdos, hijos de puta, tiemblen! ¡La libertad avanza! ¡Viva la libertad, carajo! ¡Vamos!
Good stuff. Milei wants to abolish 80% of the national government, pretty much everything but defense and police, because it is, quote, parasitic, corrupt, and useless. He wants to abolish the central bank, calling it a scam, a mechanism to cheat people through inflation, and he endorses Bitcoin as a way for the people to fight back. He's pro-gun, he thinks climate change is a hoax, and he is now the front-runner for October. If so, the long-suffering Argentinian people could finally get a break from the 115% inflation they're currently suffering, that's 6% per month, the shrinking economy, and the crime wave rampaging across the country thanks to its parasitic and useless police. First, the details. Last week was just the primary, not the election. In U.S. terms, imagine if every party held their primary on a single day. So it simply means Milei is now the official candidate of his Liberty Advances party. But the votes are taken as a barometer of actual voting in October, and that was the bombshell. Milei got over 30% of the vote, while the leading left-wing candidate got 21%. The leading rhino of the center-right got just 17%. Now, we're still 2 months from the election, and if nobody gets 50% in the first round, there is a runoff a few weeks later. So assuming this week's results, the rhino would drop out after the first round, and then it's Milei versus the left. At which point, it's a question, do the center-right voters go populist, or does the left and rhinos gang up on Milei? Now, across Latin America, people are sick of their ruling elites. For the same reason we are sick of ours: corruption, incompetence, inflation, and crime. Historically, in Argentina, as in most countries, voters' reaction is to fire the bastards and hire the other bastards in the other party. But like Trump, some are concluding they have to fire all the bastards and go with an outsider. El Salvador's right populist outsider Bukele is actually the most popular president in Latin America right now. He polls around 90% for balancing the books, cutting crime from one of the worst on earth to one of the best on earth by actually locking up criminals, and famously making Bitcoin legal tender alongside the US dollar. On the other hand, right populist Bolsonaro in Brazil also tried, and the empire struck back, with Brazil's left-wing Supreme Court launching a witch hunt that has banned him for life and could put him in prison, which might remind you of America at the moment. The left is bankrupt. Nobody likes them. They're coasting on fumes from their long march capture of education, media, and the institutions. Each time the left crushes populists, rather than addressing the people's anger, that anger builds and the populists get more strident. Some even want to abolish the central bank and 80% of the state. There will be more martyrs like Bolsonaro, but worldwide, so many have woken up to what the elite is doing. I think the elite is fighting a rearguard battle they will lose. For now, Argentina's establishment may go after Milei hard. I'd be surprised if they didn't. At which point we see if Argentinians finally get rid of the elite that has brutalized them for over a century. Okay, we'll be watching. See you next time.
From Citizen Free Press, this interview will break the internet. And yes, it absolutely will, just like the backs of the elites in time will eventually be broken, and like Peter said, the elites are fighting a losing battle, and lose they most certainly will. It simply takes time and good people to persevere. So, I cannot get over the fact of how firebrand this guy's rhetoric is. And you can tell just by how he positions himself, how he looks, his demeanor, he's clearly an absolute character. And let's go ahead and get into the fact of how much of an absolute character he is. He starts off by saying, "You can't give these shit leftards an inch." I will go ahead and transcribe this for you because he's speaking in Spanish, and I'm going to go ahead and read this aloud. Let's go. "You can't give these shit leftards an inch." She says, "Can you define shit leftists? All collectivists, all kinds of collectivists." "But why do you call them shit?" she says. He says, "Because they are shit. If you think differently from them," he says, "they will kill you. This is the point. You can't give a shit leftist an inch. If you give them an inch, they will use it to destroy you. You can't negotiate with leftards. You don't negotiate with trash because they will end you." Okay, so, like I said, his rhetoric is absolutely firebrand. This dude is just going scorched earth. He doesn't care. He's saying whatever he wants. He's saying what's in his heart, and he is just letting fucking loose. Okay, because of it, that is exactly why he has polled 30% and why he has taken so much of the voting block. Because he is speaking out against the establishment and the progressive rhetoric that is being pushed top down on so many people that they simply don't agree with. They don't mind if you agree with it, but they despise the fact that it's being pushed on them and their family to inculcate them in ideologies that they do not support. Moving on, we see Javier Milei, and this is Austin Peterson. He says, "Can you please run for president here?" Man, I would absolutely love someone to come in and just bust out the establishment and the knees in the United States. But moving on, let's get back to Argentina. He starts off with Ministry of Sports and Tourism. Out. Ministry of Culture. Out. Ministry of Environment and Sustainable Development. Out. Ministry of Women and Genders and Diversity Studies. Out. Ministry of Public Works. Out. Even if you resist. Ministry of Science and Technology and Innovation, out. Ministry of Labor and Employment, out. Ministry of Education, which is indoctrination, out. Ministry of Transport, out. Ministry of Health, out. Ministry of Social Development, out. The thievery of politics is over. Long live liberty. I love this guy. He's such just activated person with so much energy. He makes me smile and laugh. I would love to see this guy in a presidential debate style that the United States has, because if he keeps this firebrand rhetoric, he's probably more hilarious than Donald Trump to a degree. Although Donald Trump is just so charismatic and ridiculous, and he just kind of goose steps all over everyone on the stage and bullies all these political nerds, that's realistically why he has so much power. Anyways, let's go ahead and jump into this article from The Economist that we were talking about people covering before, where they were saying how they did nothing but slander this man. Let's go. Now we move on to the article from The Economist. We go ahead and see what the filthy smear merchants have to say. Can Javier Milei's radical libertarianism save Argentina? Our interviews explores his wild economic ideas and his authoritarian streak. Interesting. Let's go ahead and move on. It says, Argentina needs saving. Annual inflation is 113%. The peso's black market value against the dollar has fallen by half this year after decades of economic mismanagement. Mostly under the Peronist administration, Argentinians are fed up with the venal and incompetent politicians. Much like most Americans, much like most people across the country. Their dismay has helped propel Javier Milei, a self-described libertarian and anarcho-capitalist who entered Congress in only 2021, to become the frontrunner for the presidential election in October. Even by the standards of Argentine politics, he can sound eccentric. He is said to have hired a medium to consult Conan, his dead mastiff. That's just strange. Nevertheless, Mr. Milei talks a good game. He is steeped in neoliberal economics, as he has displayed in the 3-hour interview with The Economist. He wants to privatize all state companies, dollarize the economy, and reduce the country's deficit to zero in his first year. Chef's kiss, man, that's impressive as a goal. His political and economic models, he says, are Australia, Israel, Ireland, and New Zealand. For years, talk of free market capitalism has been a guaranteed vote loser in bloated statist Argentina. Past attempts to liberalize have all faltered, yet if Mr. Milei wins the election next month, the country could in theory become again a laboratory for exciting dynamism and promoting ideas. And it's really nice to see that they at least admit that this is incredibly fascinating and it can lead to many, many new exciting ideas that will be promoted, and they can effectively use this as a model to structure other things around if it ends up working. So, the paper says it would be delighted if Mr. Milei is to usher in a new age of liberalism in Argentina. However, it seems unlikely. His policies are poorly thought through. Far from building a consensus he would struggle to govern, and if frustrated, some Argentinians worry he might convincingly and conceivably turn authoritarian. These people don't even understand the fundamental definition of liberty nor libertarianism, so the person who wants to detach the power of the state from having control over people's lives, wants to reduce the size and scale and scope of government, that person wants to effectively be an authoritarian ruler. The mental gymnastics are off the charts. We move on. His proposal to scrap the national currency for the greenback is superficially alluring. Other countries have done it, including Ecuador and El Salvador, and Argentina's economy certainly needs bold reform. Dollarization would immediately bring down inflation and exchange rates that would wreak havoc on trade. But under such a system, Argentine banks and households would need a float of dollars to get up and running, which Mr. Milei has no way of providing. Currently, Argentina cannot service its debts to the IMF, its biggest creditor. It uses its yuan currently, which it borrows from China. And realistically, we also borrow money from China. We pay them off with money that we print, which they know has no value, but it keeps everything going because China, much like us, is a ghost economy, except far worse to a degree than we are. Moving on. In the medium term, moreover, through dollarization would stop the state of printing money. It would not automatically restrain Argentina's prolific fiscal policy. Politicians would still try to borrow too much, and there would be no central bank to inflate the debt away. Fiscal consolidation would require political will that Argentina has seldom shown in the past. Well, they've never had a libertarian in office before. To make matters worse, Argentina is on the brink of default, which dollarization would make even more painful, since there would be no lender of the last resort if Argentina's central bank disappeared with the peso. The next president will surely have to go cap in hand to the IMF, and this is the kind of delicate diplomatic task which Mr. Milei plainly lacks the right temperament. How do they know he lacks the right temperament? Just because he's explosive and firebrand when he has conversations with certain people doesn't mean he has no capacity to have small, nuanced, and in-depth conversations. This is the same exact type of slander they did to Trump. I don't think Trump's the greatest person on earth. In fact, I'm not really the biggest fan of him at all. But the fact is that they slandered him and acted like he was nothing more than this big, brash, bully moron, and that's not the case at all. Donald Trump got to the point he's at in life because he's intelligent, he's smart, he's a good businessman, and he knows what he's doing. He's a good marketer. And that's exactly why Donald Trump won the presidency, because of how good of a marketer he was. Sidestepping, moving on. His closest advisor appears to be his sister. He says incendiary things about his opponents. He suggested that a former presidential aide should be beheaded. Okay, that's a bit much. He is a fan of Jair Bolsonaro, a populist ex-president of Brazil who copied some of Donald Trump's anti-democratic tactics. Also, I don't know what the person did that he said should be beheaded, so moving on. If it was like abusing a child, I'm just going to leave that there. He seems to believe conspiracy theories about election rigging in Brazil and, more worryingly, at home. Despite coming first in Argentina's primaries, he claimed he was robbed of 5% of the vote. Who knows? Maybe he was. I certainly don't. I'm not a fan of democracy in the first place anyways. Mr. Milei's view of history is troubling too. His running mate, a former lawyer for soldiers accused of atrocities during Argentina's military dictatorship of 76 to 83, plays up the crimes of left-wing guerrillas who fought the junta rather than the bloodiest actors of the junta itself. Mr. Milei, both sides committed crimes, a line that civil libertarians do not find reassuring. Intemperate, rash, and outlandish, little about Mr. Milei suggests he is the savior Argentina needs. Because, yeah, the people who heralded over the destruction of what was the greatest country in the world and who supported the policies that were pushed by things like the Biden administration, the Trump administration, the Bush administration, the Obama administration, those people who write for The Economist, the ones who weren't able to predict the fact that we are now in $32 trillion of debt, those people are criticizing someone who wants to restructure and try and fix Argentinians' economic issues. Wow, isn't that insane? That's all I've got for this. I'm going to go ahead and leave it there. Thank you for watching if you got this far. Leave it a thumbs up if you liked it, a thumbs down if you didn't. Tell me where I'm wrong in the comment section down below. Give me something to read to explain why you believe what you believe about the economic fundamentals of your approach to how you see the economy. I would love to read it so I can have something to counter my own understanding of this. Like I said, I'm more of the Austrian school. I fundamentally believe I'm right about this, and you're really going to need to provide me some sound grounding evidence. Nonetheless, I digress. Thank you for watching so much. Leave a thumbs up if you liked it, thumbs down if you didn't. Stay lovely, stay great. Peace out.